And we started to see why I think the statistic is that most CROs last for less than 18 months. I think the average tenure is 18 months. Keep in mind, every interview we were in, there was a CRO in seat. So what that actually means is the interviews for that CRO's replacement on average start at month 12.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm joined by Bill Ryan, the co-founder and managing partner at Big Wheel Performance. At RevGenAI, we focus on how B2B leaders are generating revenue in 2026 through AI, thought leadership, and building better go-to-market systems. Bill works with B2B SaaS founders, investors, and operators, building capital-efficient go-to-market systems and investor-grade revenue engines. Today, we're going to dive in deep into what breaks when a company is moving from founder-led sales into real established go-to-market systems, and how to build durable go-to-market architecture that you can apply AI to without scaling up the disorganization. Bill, it's great to have you.
Merit, thanks for having me. Appreciate being here.
Of course. So before we dive deep into the go-to-market work, can you give us a little bit of a background on what led you to founding Big Wheel Performance and really what the company does at its core?
Yeah, so my co-founder and I both had a long tenure running sales teams for both startups and in the larger software ecosystem. We actually met at SAP, where I ran a part of the utilities practice for several years, and he ran the mid-market sales motion. We both went to different places. I went to Salesforce and then a PE-backed SaaS company. He had a very similar journey. Both of us found ourselves looking for the next gig in PE-backed SaaS. And we kept getting on interviews where it was very clear that the investors or the founder or whoever we were talking to wasn't sure if they needed a transformational CRO or an operational CRO. And the confusion was so pronounced that we couldn't tell what we were aiming at. And we started to see why I think the statistic is that most CROs last for less than 18 months. I think the average tenure is 18 months. Keep in mind, every interview we were in, there was a CRO in seat. So what that actually means is the interviews for that CRO's replacement on average start at month 12. And one of the key reasons it doesn't work out, like any project, is the objectives aren't clearly stated. Do I need somebody to rebuild everything, or do I need somebody to operate and iterate? And it's totally different people. And then we stepped back and looked at our personal backgrounds, and we realized that, frankly, we were transformative. We had a lot of success in every role in the first year, first 18 months, and then got kind of bored. Said we weren't that interested in steady state operation. So we were able to take a lot of these interviews and without trying very hard, convince the stakeholders that the best opportunity might be to focus on transformation now, getting back to baseline, going for the right KPIs, the way a PE operator would do it, and then handing off to an operational CRO that's been successful in a similar system before and is capable of iterating and scaling that growth. And that's what created Big Wheel Performance.
I never thought of that distinction when it comes to, as an entrepreneur, you can really, I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to this, that you have like this ADD of thinking of a million ideas every single day and really like thinking of like what would completely transform something. And then that there's another part of your brain that oftentimes is hard to access, which is just doing the boring work and repeating the same operations and scaling what works and being able to split test things and just make things more efficient and more scalable. So having that distinction is really interesting to me.
I mean, a truly transformative leader, if they're not careful and self-disciplined, will keep on breaking and keep on transforming long after the ROI has been achieved.
Exactly. And that's kind of like the bigger risk is that you start breaking what is already working.
You start breaking what you fixed. You go all the way around. And when we started to think of it in terms of transformative versus operational. And we started thinking of it in terms of what we were doing on a day to day and what we were building. Once we realized that we weren't building something that was interesting to run, we realized that there's incentives for CROs or any leader you hire to build something that they think is fun to run, that they think will build a resume, that they think, everybody wants to manage 100 salespeople. Everybody that's managed 100 salespeople wants to manage a team of 150. Um, if you start to think about something that what does this require? What's the most capital efficient way to run this go to market? What's the most scalable process? What's the lowest money in for the greatest money out? You start to realize that you're building something that's very different than the mechanisms you built before. Because one way or another, the things you were building when you were a permanent CRO were things that were designed for you to run. Now we're building things that are designed for a lot of different people to run, and often cases, people that don't need a C in front of their title. If you design a standard go to market, you can find people that have run exactly those systems, exactly those plays, and you can take your choice from a couple of them.
So help me understand this. When you get approached by a new company and really dive into what's actually broken inside of their system, how do you identify between um, whether they're needing a transformation or just operational scale and efficiency?
Well, unfortunately, and this might be one of our go to market challenges, uh, people don't come to us when they should. They come to us 6 months after. People are absolutely at an inflection point. Either they're getting ready for a raise and they've gotten some bad feedback. Either they've just gotten some money and they haven't deployed it right and investors are starting to turn, or something in a founder led motion is breaking. So often our clients don't come to us on a winning streak. So sales is really our backgrounds, and people do come to us to fix sales. Either it's a founder owning the company or investors that are saying, hey, we're flatlining here. We need somebody to get in. In 30, 40 plus engagements, we have not yet seen sales to be the primary problem. Sales is the primary symptom. So coming in to fix sales in a lot of cases is just rearranging deck chairs. So we take a more holistic look. And since we both operated and all our partners underneath us have operated in PE environments, PEs get a bad name for how maniacal they are about the numbers. But remember, those numbers are pretty baked out, and they are the best proxy we can get to enterprise value and to the right things. So if you take a look at it like a PE would look at it in the diligence phase, you start with product market fit. What are your product market fit signals? How's that going? Has anything changed in the market? What's your ICP? What are you building for whom? What are your clients telling you? All these things. And you can get a holistic picture. And 9 times out of 10, the sales are reflecting something, either macro, outside of the company, or maybe our ICP is straight a little bit. Maybe some of the process discipline is coming back to haunt us. But one way or another, the only way to fix these things and the only way to identify the next set of challenges that is coming in is putting processes in place to capture the data, to isolate variables, and to make the company, process dependent, not people dependent. And once you have those things, and once you have a revenue assembly line working, it's very easy to see what's off track, and it's very easy to catch it almost the second it goes off track. And so you can iterate much smaller. You don't have to do these massive changes going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, but oftentimes I like how you establish that sales oftentimes is the symptom, but the core of the problem is the real service or product market fit.
Yeah, I mean, sales is when all your work meets reality. That is when the company's entire efforts to get a product going, to target the right market and everything, that's where the rubber meets the road. So, it's not often just sales execution. And also when people come to us, it is usually after they've replaced sales leaders, and you can have a real candid conversation. Says, well, this sales leader, why did you hire them? What was their resume? What did it look like they could do it? Chances are that sales leader was pretty qualified. Chances are the candidates that you're looking at are very similar to that sales leader. Now, you could assume that you got unlucky or that your picker's off. But basically, when I see generally qualified sales leaders being cycled out every year, I think it's probably not a sales execution challenge.
Hmm. Yeah. Oftentimes there's just something fundamentally wrong with the business. Um, let's talk about specifically the outcomes that Big Wheel delivers. I know that you talk about, a lot about investor grade revenue engines. Is the real outcome that companies come to you, they're looking to raise more capital and grow more, or they, mostly you're speaking to founders who want to exit their companies or just make more profit? Like what do you feel like is the main outcome that you help facilitate the most?
Well, people come to us at inflection points, and there's many different flavors of inflection, but one way or another, what we position is your company needs to be growing without you. An investor, the value of your company, the enterprise value is dependent on how repeatable this thing is, how few dependencies it has on people. It's the process. Early stage investors don't normally invest for you to prove product market fit, for you to test ICP. They invest to scale the go to market motion. You've already built something, you've already proven something. Here are all your signals. We're going to dump some money into the top of it, and we're going to get predictable pipeline performance out of that. So when you look at investor ready doesn't necessarily mean you have to take investment. Investor ready just means you have a very healthy business that is capable of commanding, many, many multiples higher than it would if it was people dependent and didn't have processes. So one way or another, our outcome is something that a PE or any other investor could look at and say, this is an investable, healthy business. Now, what you want to do with that outcome is entirely up to you. And in fact, many companies we've seen lately don't want external investments. They haven't had external investments. Now that puts them in a tough spot because with external investment comes scrutiny, comes comparing you to other companies, comes tough board meetings asking you those kind of questions. And the end result is a healthier company. So somebody that doesn't want to take investment or hasn't taken investment before can call us in and go through this process without a gun to their head. And they can say, hey, I know a PE would say do this. For these reasons, I would like to do this and make an exception here. I'll make an exception here. But these 18 other KPIs, I'm going to manage. And it's not about getting them totally in line with what a PE would want to see. It's about telling them where the exceptions are and giving them the choice. Do I want to make that exception or don't I? And by and large, they should be, more standardized than not.
Mm. Yeah, I really like the strategical frame of uh, of of helping them understand how to scale in alignment with the optionality of later bringing on investment or getting that
I
extra
mean,
scrutiny and being prepared for that.
we
Um,
see this all the time. I have a term sheet and they're asking me uh, about these KPIs that I'm not tracking. You know, can you fix it? No, we can't fix it. We can start tracking them and we can show what it is. But if you weren't tracking it, you probably weren't improving it. You know, very few times in my career have I gone and pulled a KPI that wasn't being tracked and been pleasantly surprised. It just what you track is what you typically tend to exceed. So, you really have to, even if a strategic is looking at you, and even if a strategic sees value beyond what the balance sheet says, they still have to make the case. Why am I paying him a premium multiple? What would this multiple be out in the marketplace? And if there's a bunch of KPIs that you're not performing on that the market values, one way or another, you're going to get a lower value than you could have.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost kind of like I feel like you're just adding accountability without the extra pressure.
Yeah. And that helps. And the thing is too, that and I wasn't quite sure that this would be valuable when we started the firm, but we're seeing over and over again that it's very valuable. What investors like to see, whether it's a PE, whether it's a VC, or whether it's a strategic acquirer, their biggest variable isn't exactly how this would fold into our portfolio. It is, how does this management team respond to PE level guidance, you know, PE level rigor or something like that. So when it's a big wheel performance client, they can say, well, I've gone through this process. I have 13 scorecards in my go to market. We're moving these 5 metrics. These are our top priorities. And here's our month over month performance, moving those. This one may have gone down a little bit, but we knew that, we called it, and we decided to focus on this. You don't have to have the perfect story. You just have to have an explainable story. And if one number goes down, and it was to make a strategic bet, it was to push up another number that you thought drove more value or something like that, that's a better story for an investor, because they're saying, oh, okay, they can call their shot. They can manage the KPIs. They can manage the puts and takes. This is a professional management team that is going to be real careful with my money.
Yeah. Let's switch angles here for a second and talk about your own priorities inside of Big Wheel. I'm understanding that you're selling to founders, and credibility is probably one of the most important things, as well as just the network effect of getting trust before people actually agree to an engagement with you. What do you see as the biggest constraint in your own ability to expand or go to market?
Well, it is a trust-based, word of mouth ecosystem. And, because people are telling you their problems. You have to be very vulnerable when somebody's looking at your business. Um, the problem with that is, oftentimes we get referrals or things like that maybe we're not the best people to help. For a lot of reasons, we can't help everybody, and we like to look for the home runs. So what we've done is we do a 30-day diagnostic. We have scorecards, and we basically put people through a PE due diligence process. So their output of that is exactly where they score based on the latest KPIs and industry benchmarks. And they have that. And there will typically be an execution plan after that. Now, Big Wheel Performance is crafting that execution plan uh, as we're doing the diagnostic. And one of the biggest things we're looking for is, will this team accept this change? Will there be champions? Will this feel good for everybody? Because frankly, we could bill for a lot of hours and make our projects go really long if we weren't interested in driving an efficient outcome. And, we've all had various degrees of success before this. So we're not looking for these huge uphill battles. We're looking to come in and add value, have good partnerships, and work ourselves out of a job. So the biggest tool to really build trust is going through that diagnostic and saying, okay, now based on what we've worked together, based on these things we found, if you'd like us to go forward, here's what it looked like. If you'd like to do this on your own, Here's how we'd implement it. You could call us for help. If either we or the client feels that a different skill set needs to be brought in, we're happy to introduce. We're also happy to, you know, take calls every once in a while from whatever new team they bring in, to help them succeed. And honestly, those kind of things, the free help we may have given a founder, the after engagement support we give all of our clients, that really builds us a lot of trust in the market, and certainly gets those word of mouth referrals to keep coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the clarity of just taking the start to diagnose, and also being very aware that that is a very vulnerable process and you need a lot of trust to begin a process like that. Um, I like to ask this question because it gets creative answers. So if you could wave a magic wand and solve one of your biggest um, growth constraints to help Big Wheel grow for the next year, what specific problem would you tackle with this magic wand?
Um, that's a good question, because if I drank my own champagne, I would have a great answer to that. But sometimes my customers have better answers for these questions than I do, because we spend so much more time focusing outward on the customer outcome, and less time focusing on ours. But I think there's a tremendous amount of noise in the consulting space and in the fractional space right now. And there are so many people that are very talented and have had good careers that are dipping their toe into the fractional water, saying, "Oh, maybe I want to do this for a little bit until I get this job." But they haven't actually separated themselves as an employee from what they would do as a consultant or a fractional. They haven't built a team underneath them. They haven't built standard processes that can scale as they go into the clients. And we often get referrals based on something personally we've done, an engagement I've run, an engagement Fred's run or Eric's run. Um, and we spend a lot of time separating, you know, we are fractional. Sure, we can do fractional leadership, but we have a process and a system and support staff that makes this go a lot faster and is proven. And kind of dispensing with that other noise, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you're highlighting a problem that I think is just prevalent these days, mostly because of AI. It's just enabling everybody to send out a lot more messaging, and also allows people to kind of really hype themselves up, and really being able to point to specific moments where you've actually delivered real outcomes and built things that actually matter, and point to real case studies. I think that that's going to become more and more important to being able to communicate how you can actually deliver the outcome that you're talking about. And yeah, really having that credibility up front so that people are more open to receive your insight, and trust you to guide them through this process.
When my co-founder and I started, we were really, we didn't have infrastructure yet. So we were really focused on the fractional leadership side of our business. And we had a line which resonated, which was fractional by design, not default. We started this business to be fractional leaders. We're not waiting to get another job.
I like that. Um, Let me ask you, on your path, who's a business mentor or operator that really kind of like shaped your thinking about revenue and go to market?
There's been a lot of them. And I suppose when I think back to early in my career, I was involved in a startup called MFG.com. We were an online marketplace for custom manufactured parts. And we received an investment from Jeff Bezos. We were actually his first internet investment since Amazon. And I was relatively low on the totem pole. But the advice that he gave the board and the other senior leaders about focus, uh, just being focused on a couple of things and starting with what won't change. In the manufacturing space in 2005, a lot of things were changing and we were trying to stay ahead of it. Focus on what's not going to change. What's always going to be true in your customer base, what's always going to be true in manufacturing. And my favorite is don't use PowerPoint ever for internal meetings. And as I grew in SAP and other places, I just saw I saw that the successful leaders did two things really well, which was summarizing. And in the world of AI, for some reason, we've lost that skill. Is distilling down through the right questions, things like that. At SAP, if you were running a good sized group, you had $50 million deals to get through in an hour long forecast call. So you had to be extremely pointed, extremely focused, and ask the right hard questions and poke in on where it's needed. So I think that focus and the ability to dig in on what matters and block out all the other noise. The other thing that they did well was enable and reward dissenters. Um, and in my case, I took that to mean I had two nuclear submarine people as direct reports at my last full-time gig. And they loved nothing more than to correct me, prove me wrong, whatever. They loved dissenting because we came at things in exactly the opposite ways. I think a lot of immature leaders and a lot of leaders in general don't reward that behavior. But ultimately, that behavior is what's going to cover your blind spots. It's what's going to drive a better outcome and ultimately more enterprise value.
Yeah. Yeah. You highlighted three things that I want to reflect before I kind of like ask my last question here. Um, so the ability to focus, the ability to kind of distill and understand what's important, and then also the ability to have uh, diverse thinking or challenging thinking to ultimately lead to the best outcome, which I think is something that
Not just to have it, to reward it, to reward it, to highlight it, to point it out, even if that point of view might have been wrong. I like that you challenged me because the bad decisions that I've seen, and I'm old enough now to have seen a lot of them. The bad decisions were not the ones that got debated. The bad decisions were the ones that were unanimous. Everybody said, yes, we don't even need to talk about that very much. That's clearly the path. That is the path that gets you to the rocks. So if somebody's not playing devil's advocate in a room and it's a major decision, you've got a blind spot.
100%. And I like, again, doubling down on like reward what is important. And so we're living through a major technological revolution right now. We didn't speak this much, that much during this conversation about AI, but AI is changing everything right now. And so, if you were to sit in front of, uh, an early stage entrepreneur, even somebody who's kind of like embedded in a company, starting their first role, managing a sales team, and really starting to, think about how to adapt, go to market in this day and age, and how to adapt themselves as leaders. Um, what would be the number one most practical advice that you could summarize from all your knowledge to help them really focus on what matters most as far as their skill set and what they need to hyper focus on?
That's a tough question. Tough question when you're new. Um, but here's what I see will always be true. Um, when you focus on what you think is coming or whatever else, you can try to get ahead of the market. It's like timing the stock market. You don't know when AI is going to do this. You don't know what the next model is going to make. You don't know all these things. But what you know is today there's dirt on the floor. I would be more valuable to everybody if I picked up a broom. Like, focus on solving the problems at hand. Focus on being valuable to your customers and your company every day. Now, also focus on the tools that make you help, that make that possible. So you have to focus on AI as a mechanism to solve the problems, as a mechanism to add value. But too often people start with the tool and try to figure out where to put it. Pick up a broom, solve a customer's problem, take a call that somebody didn't want to call, put something on paper that nobody's written down as a process. Use AI to do it. Whatever tool you use is fine. But if people just put their head down and focus on driving customer value, driving the value of our company, being a good coworker, being forward thinking and everything like that, it will work out for them. Because frankly, 95% of the people are not thinking that way.
Yeah, I think too many people are trying to learn AI instead of focusing on what has always been true, which is focus on the business problem that you're solving, focus on the outcome that you're driving. And yeah,
I
Bill,
mean,
go
and
ahead.
and of course, no company can put in AI and invent a process and invent a customer thing. You have to have a proper go-to-market process, and you have to be measuring the right things to be able to deploy the tool of AI to make it better. So our work doesn't change. Uh, most of our work could be qualified as AI readiness, building the process that we can deploy AI against. And when I say hand off to operators, increasingly we're handing off our work to an AI system, which we build. We have partners that builds it. Increasingly, those operators are agents that are running that after the fact. But our core work doesn't change. We are still making sure companies are focused on the right things, are measuring the things that drive enterprise value, are executing the things that drive enterprise value, and AI is just now the tool that makes that happen, and that's not going anywhere. That's going to continue to be the tool, but it is not the company. It is a tool the company deploys.
Yeah, that's a great way of summing it up. Bill, I really appreciate this conversation. For anyone who wants to reach out and connect with you, where's the best place for them to find you?
Bigwheelperformance.com or bill.ryan@bigwheelperformance.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Bill.
Mayor, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.